All right, welcome to this evening's Bible study. If you want to go ahead and open up your Bible and kind of follow through, we're not going to read, but starting in chapter 9 through 12, we're going to cover the southern and northern campaigns. So let's go and have a word of prayer and then we'll get started. Our most righteous and wonderful Father, we thank you for this opportunity again to be here, to study your word. We hope, Father, as we look all the way back into this history of your children as they come into the promised land, that we can learn the same lessons that they learned as they trusted you, obeyed you, and were successful. There's many things that we can apply in our lives, and we hope that we can do that to make this a living history for us as well. We thank you for each person who is a part of this class, and that we hope that we would take this knowledge and shape our wisdom into your wisdom and apply it as we live every day of our lives. We ask this in Christ's name, amen. Okay, so we said, this is a survey of both Joshua and Judges, and it's a time period. It's kind of that encapsulating time period from shifting from the wandering, coming out of Egypt, and now Joshua is the book basically showing the fulfillment and the promises being delivered to the people in that journey and the activity that went through it. First half of the book is the actions in which they come about in taking the land and some of the lessons we learned. We started out, we saw the people come across the river. When they came across the river, we saw that they prepared themselves before going into battle with Jericho. And in that preparation, it's interesting because we learned some things about the condition spiritually of the people before they even start. Is one, they had stopped circumcising. They have their first Passover in years. So they had become very what we call worldly, secular. They had also become so dependent upon manna, God providing them something, that then after the Passover, then all of a sudden, guess what? They're eating off the land. So it went from God providing them social welfare program, to support them, to now guess what? You're going to have to go out and get it. Now, God did bless them because he promised them. He said, the cities in which you take, you're not going to have to build. The vineyards, you're not going to have to plant. And so they are getting that blessing. Jericho was a success, wasn't it? They marched around 7 times. Walls come down. They destroy everything, supposedly. Rahab is rescued. We see the faith that she has, and her family was spared. But then the complexity of sin creeps in, and we see that Achan takes some of the forbidden items and hides it in his tent. Now, nobody knows it, but then all of a sudden the next objective is the city of Ai, and Ai becomes a disaster. They don't consult with the Lord. They just send out a measly 3,000 men, and they travel up there, and they get run off, chased. 38 men are killed. And not a tremendous amount of battle loss, but still 38 men lost their lives. And it's interesting. It's funny because my son and I were talking about this today, how Joshua responds. And when he responds to God, he is almost like blaming God. Like, what have you done? Brought us over here to this side so that they could then destroy us? And then who's going to hold up your name? But God says, get up. God talks back to him and says, you're missing something. And so even the most spiritually leader you have at times can have these failures and realize, wait a minute, this ain't on God. This is probably on me, something I've done. And so he directs them how to find out who it was. They find out who it was. It was Achan, and their entire family was destroyed, burned. Everything was destroyed as a part of that penance for the sin that they had transgressed. So this is where the term, if you ever heard it, and I'm sure most of you had, sin in the camp. When someone says, well, something's not going right, well, there must be sin in the camp. This is the historical reference, to when people will say that. That the reason it's not working is because there's sin. Something's wrong, among them. After Ai, they travel up to Shechem, And between two mountains, Ebal and Gezeri, they set up and they read off between Mount Ebal, they read the curses of the law. Now, if you go back to Deuteronomy and you say, well, where are the curses of the law? Well, those are the blessings and the punishment if you follow the law. And that's what they were doing, is reading. They have the tribe in the valley, and they have the people there, all the tribes down in the valley, and they read off the blessings of Gezer and the curses off Ebal. They were instructed to do this back in Deuteronomy by Moses. Moses said, hey, when you get into the land, I want you to go to Mount Ebal, and then you're going to set up 2 stones, and you're going to whitewash them, and you're going to put the law on those stones, and then you're going to have this. Now, what's interesting is it didn't quite go the way that if you read it word for word out of Deuteronomy according to Moses, but it was done. In other words, the reading of the curses and the blessings, that wasn't necessarily directly said, but the law was read. So some of the things that we see about this altar and the sacrifice which they were to build as well was, one, it's refocusing them. They come out, they cross Jordan, they circumcise, they have Passover, and you think they're spiritually ready, and obviously it didn't stop all sin. Baptism doesn't stop all sin either, right? And a lot of times, I've thought of this time where they go up here and they read off the law, very similar to the need to go to church. Now, I know, oh, there he goes, preaching you got to go to church. But what's the purpose of the assembly? Well, what did it do for them? It renews our covenant. It reminds us every Sunday when we come together to worship that, it shows our obedience, that we're an obedient people, that we follow, don't forsake the assembly, as some do, so that you can encourage one another. It produces unity among us, doesn't it? And the people that don't come, well, we don't know who they are by many years later. And it's sad, I've had people say that. Well, I'm a member of Panlanier, and I'm like, I've been there 40-something years, and I've never, not that bad of an example, but it's like, so it produces this unity as well. And the other thing that our individual worship does is what? It expresses gratitude. And so there is that kind of familiarity where when we become a Christian, we go through the waters, right? They went through Jordan. They come on the other side. They're circumcised. Through baptism, our heart is circumcised, isn't it? We celebrate in the Lord's Supper. And then guess what? We have an Ai. We sin. And sometimes we look at God and go, why did you do this to me? I'm supposed to be one of your children. And God's going, shut up. It's you. Yep. We're talking, but it's really God's like, be quiet. Look at our own heart.
That's right.
And then just like the way we see that God's children win, is then they went where? They kind of went to church. They went up to, Shechem, and they got themselves refocused. And so there's a lot of things. That's why I say, try to look when you're reading the history, make it personal. Stop for a moment and don't just take it as some historical thing, but look at the parallels that we can draw from and see that we're no different.
That's right. Amen.
We're no different than what they were as well. Now, when we start chapter 9, we jump into this very interesting story about the deception of the Gibeonites. And it's really a good one. It's really a good one. The Gibeonites are Hivites. Hivites are a part of the condemned. They're a part of the condemned group that would fall under the broad category of Canaanites that were to be destroyed. And so they fear the Israeli army. They're hearing everything they've done. They're unstoppable. And so they come up with a great idea. Let's pretend to be a nation that's far away. Now, I got a question for you. What difference would that make? If you're a Gibeonite and you're sitting there going, okay, what can we do to stop them? Because they're just killing everybody over here. And how would they know something, right?
Well, the difference is, if they're from far away, then the Israelites would think, okay, well, we don't have to mess with them because they're not one of the ones that's occupying the land that we have to get rid of. And so we can,
Yeah, it puts a barrier, doesn't it? A layer in between, well, we're way over here somewhere else. And so we traveled all the way over here. And instead of saying, well, wait a minute, are you on our short list? Ooh, you're next.
I was thinking a little differently that why didn't they go to someone closer then? Instead of traveling all this distance, why didn't they go to someone closer that would help protect them instead of traveling all this distance?
So why did not the Gibeonites go somewhere to get protection?
I mean, that's like saying we go 300 miles, and why didn't you stay someplace closer? I mean, they traveled all this distance. To me, that would be a false story anyway. I mean.
Okay. Oh, okay. I see what you mean. In other words, why are you traveling all the way over here to make an alliance with us? And who are we? We're not really a nation yet. We're over here in battle. And why would you send ambassadors here? Aren't you more worried about all y'all who are way over yonder? Make your alliances over there. That is. But you also got to remember, there's not a whole lot of thinking on the side of the Israelites, right? They're not thinking too deep. But that would have been one of the first ones going, why with us? We're a little bit on the go side, we're a little bit unstable right now. And we're in conquer mode. We're not in let's set up diplomacy mode and alliances and figure out who's on our north and our south border, and set up trade stuff. No, you're right. That does have an aspect of why. From the Gibeonite side, though, there's no stopping them. There's no stopping the Israelites. And now, if you look at where they're positioned in juxtaposition to the geography, they don't know which way they're going. They have moved back. Now, okay, so, and trust me, they've got spies following them everywhere. They can't do anything without probably all these kings and all the region they're in watching them and getting reports back and forth. I bet you they have one on site, one traveling and telling the kings, what's going on, and then traveling back, and that guy going and giving a report. That's how much they know what they're doing. Where are they going next? Because they've come in the middle, pretty much in the middle of the territory. They didn't come from the south. They didn't come from the north. They're sitting in the middle. So it kind of throws them. It's like, okay, well, what are we going to do? Because if they came from the south, everybody could line up and come down, right? But they come in the middle, then we have, what do? We got half the kings in the south, we have half of them in the north, and then they go north, it's about 20 miles, and they stop at Shechem. And they do this religious thing, And then they move down back near Jericho at Gilgal. Oh, what are they doing? Now remember, we know there's over, the last census that we kind of have a recording of is over 600,000 fighting men. Now add families. So there's nearly 1 million. And if you look at the geography again, try to put 1 million people in the hill country. On rough terrain, in other words. Where is it better for them? It's better to keep your reserves in an area that's open, where you can, all your logistics and supplies and communication and the, tents and everything, it's level. It's not up, down, around that valley and over there, and half the tribes are up on this side of that hill and that hill. So they move back down. Plus, there's another point. Guess where all the fields are at in agriculture? Down in the valley, in the Jordan Valley. They're not farmers yet. They're harvesters. And they're feeding nearly 1 million people. But they're watching them intently. Where are they going to go next? They got to come back up by the way of Ai or that direction and head in again. But are they going to go north? Are they going to go south? So the Gibeonites, they just know they cannot go against them. So they come up with this great charade. They pretend to be far away. They get the oldest bread. They make it look like their clothes are worn out, that they've been journeying a long time. They're dusty. They're tired. And they even go through it and say, look, this bread was fresh when we left. Oh, it was so delicious. Now look at it. It's all dried out. I mean, they go to really great extent of this. And we want to make a peace treaty with you. And it was requested and received. In 3 days, they went ahead and made a treaty with him. But there's a whole guidance that God has provided them on who they could and who they couldn't align with. And fundamentally, anybody that was on the side of the river they were at, there's no treaties. They were not to make any treaties at all. And this goes back to Mosaic law. And you read this, going back to Exodus 23, I'm going to just kind of abbreviate. Exodus 23:32, you shall not make any covenant with them, lest they make you sin against me. Exodus 34:12-16, take care, lest you make a covenant with the inhabitants of the land. Deuteronomy 7:1-5, you shall make no covenant with them, and you will not intermarry with them. For why? They will turn your sons from following me. Deuteronomy 20:16-18. For the Canaanite cities in the land, do not make terms of peace. As stated, reason to prevent Israel from learning their abominations and their idolatry. So the plain point, absolutely no treaties with them at all. Now, treaties and peace with other nations outside the land was allowed. It wasn't a total, no reason. But understand, if they were going to have a treaty, it was not to subjugate them. In other words, if you look at a peace treaty, usually there's a more powerful and a weaker one. And so the weaker one wants peace because they don't want the stronger one to dominate. And so God basically was saying, you will never go in a peaceful situation to where you're less. It was that kind of, it's either going to be equality or you're going to be the greater. You're not going to, in other words, you're not going to compromise. If you make peace with someone. There were some special cases, though, that was kind of interesting with Edom, Moab, and Ammon. They're people that are descendants of Abraham. You go back to Lot and his daughters. Remember, they had some illegitimate children with their dad? And that's where you end up with the Amorites, the Moabites. Esau was the Edomites. So it's fascinating to me that God even kind of protected them in a way in the treaties, because the treaties with them were different, because it directs and kind of restricts them from the way they were to treat them. One, if you go through and look at them, it basically says you're not to seek peace or their prosperity all your days forever. But also, it directs and it says, like in Deuteronomy 2:4-6, regarding Edom, do not contend or buy food or water from them. And regarding Moab, in verse 9 of 2nd Deuteronomy, it says, do not harass or contend with them. And then Deuteronomy verse 2:19, for Ammon, it says, do not harass or contend with them. So don't start a fight. Don't go into basically merchandising and things. They're neutral. They're neutral. Now, they did not remain neutral. The Amorites and the Moabites, they didn't stay neutral. They end up attacking them while in the wilderness, and they get whooped. So, there's no welcoming them into the assembly as well. Remember that? The Moabites were never to be, brought in and accepted. So there were some things. But the issue is, they swore an oath, didn't they? And said, okay, we'll do peace with you. We make promises to God a lot. We make promises to others a lot. We don't ever call them vows today, but they're vows. And I think we have our own little loophole in getting out of promises by saying, but it wasn't a vow. Because a vow sounds like something you took a Bible and put your hand on. I swear to tell the truth, nothing but the truth, the whole truth, and that you made a vow or something, or a wedding vow, where you're standing before a judge and everything. And but they're promises. If you recall in the New Testament, it's let your yes be a yes and a no a no. Jesus said, don't make an oath because you're probably going to break it. Don't do that. And that was one of the things with the old law that here you see very powerfully. They knew they were in a bind. We made a vow, and now we have to keep it. And if there was one vow, you would say, you know what? We can disregard this one. Because one, they lied to us. Two, they're on the hit list. They've been condemned by God Almighty, right? They're doomed for destruction. They lied to us. And so, no, treaty broke. And they didn't. They didn't. Because they made the vow. The vow came across over all of it because God said, and they knew very strongly, in Numbers 32, verse 2, if a man vows, he shall not break his word. In Deuteronomy 23, 21 through 23, if you vow, you must not delay to pay. You must do what you promised. So we do, and this is where I was thinking about it. I thought, man, I don't know how many times I've used the idea of some sort of a loophole to get out of a promise or something that I said I would do. We all have. I don't feel good today. Whether it's insignificant and stuff is what I'm saying. Even some of the things that are insignificant sometimes. We'll make a promise that we're going to go mow someone's grass or go do something or go hike or whatever it might be. We're really good at finding little loopholes around justifying why I don't have to do it. And the problem with that is that comes into our spiritual life too. That if we're really good about doing it on casual things that we think are insignificant, they're not. God doesn't limit those promises to just saying, I'll go fishing with you, and then you don't. People like that they're always saying they're going to do something, and they never do it. And again, because we don't use the word vow, you made a vow that we would go fishing today. What? I don't make no vow. And I think we need to think about it. This is, again, compared to this vow that they're going to go ahead and honor versus the vows that sometimes the little promises we make, okay, how many people made New Year's resolutions? 1 billion maybe, around the world. But everybody had an idea of reflection. Everybody has done a New Year's resolution at some point in your life. Whether you finally got wise enough to go, I ain't doing that no more because I never get them done. But, we make a promise that we're going to do something. And I think especially we should start to maybe think about that idea about spiritually. Then what am I letting the Lord down? What am I saying that I promised to serve or to grow or to read my Bible or do things, and then we let him down. We forget about it. So what was the result? Well, they made a compromise and turned them into slaves. And so, but because of that, that type of deception, they end up becoming slaves, servitude. And they were willing to take it, weren't they? They were like, oh, yeah, that's good. We'll chop wood and haul water all day long. And it reads, when you read Joshua, at least whenever this was written, it says, and to this day, that's what they do. And you go all the way up into King Saul, you'll see, some of that. And we'll talk a little more about the ramifications. So what happened here? Well, first off, they forgot to reference God, refer to God. First, and how could they have done it? One, remember the law, because it wasn't new. It wasn't something new. They had their Bible. They had the testimony from God directly. And the next thing is, you're going to enter into something that's important, and you're not going to at least pray. You're not going to consult the and the Thummim and the priests and get them involved and say, this is a big deal. Now, I can defend them a little bit because there's a part of them that are like, we're at war with everybody around us. And whether they're far away or not, that's one group that's peaceful. Okay, go. We're focused. And that's a problem too, though, because you become so focused that then you forget about there's a lot more to God than just one singularity of mission. And so, they just got narrow-minded possibly, but they failed to do that. And then the other thing is, superficially, they just looked at him and go, well, yeah, they're far away. I don't think it would have been that hard to find out. Interrogate him a little deeper. And before you finally say yes, maybe you might send someone to go to find out where this fancy land is they're from far away and verify it. So their assumptions on appearance. Don't we do that sometimes? We look at things spiritually and we just, on the appearance of it, we go, that's okay. A lot of people do that in changing their worship, thinking the appearance of it, it'll attract more people. So, the long-term consequences, this kind of rolls back to what we're talking about, is one, they had to honor that, right? Perpetually. It didn't have an expiration date. As long as there was a Gibeonite, they had to honor it. And it was going to have, something that was going to turn them into servants, but it was also going to have some long-term conflict and tensions that were going to come up and continue to happen. You may remember in 2 Samuel 21, we see some tensions grow. Well, first off, we see Saul, when he became king, he decided he wanted to get rid of him. And so he starts a little genocide party. It gets stopped, but not shy of putting a lot of damage and killing a lot of Gibeonites. That was a direct violation. Well, where that conflict comes up is when David is king and a drought hits and the people are dying. And when he finds out, guess what happened? God is punishing them because Saul had violated that vow that they made all the way back here when the Gibeonites came. And he calls the Gibeonites and he says, David goes, okay, Saul did this to you. We're being punished for it. What can we do to make this right? And he said, we don't want silver or gold. We just don't care about that. And Saul's dead. And they said, so David said, so what do you want? And they said, give us 7 of his sons, and we're going to hang them. And he did. And the drought stopped.
It was at the entrance of the gate, right?
Yeah, it was in...
So everybody would be able to see it.
Yeah, they hung them up. That's right. They hung them up. Now, coming back to the story, we see where that treaty triggered panic. It triggered a panic of the kings, and they all start lining up. Now, our focus, and well, at least the book of Joshua's focus, is the southern. So it triggers what I say is a southern campaign. It wasn't by choice. It wasn't like, Joshua goes, we'll go south first. Strategically, it actually was a better choice. First choice was to go south. but it wasn't tactically chosen by Joshua. It was because of this treaty. Because immediately, once the kings in the south, especially the king of Jerusalem, finds out, he panics because he's the closest one to Gibeon. And Gibeon is that close to them, and now they're allies with the Israelites. And so he freaks. And it even says, they are a massive part of this army that they have. Now they've gained more because the Gibeonites were very strong. It even says they have mighty men of valor and that they are like a royal city. And now they've just turned over the keys to a huge portion of resources and possibly even fighting men. So I would do the same. So he lines up 4 other kings in the south, and he is now says, let's strike them. Let's strike the Gibeonites. He's not going after Joshua. He's doing it in retribution, but he's also doing it strategically because it'll hopefully, if those kings are successful, will inflict punishment, but as well knock out that asset that they could possibly use. So we find that messengers come, and they come to Joshua, and they tell Joshua, wow, we've got a problem. We've got this army lining up. We've got 4 kings, and we need your help. And so they kind of pull the treaty card. I mean, again, Joshua could have said, you cheated us, man. You lied to us, and you're on the condemned list. We're going to honor our peace treaty, but we can't prevent others from hitting you, wink, wink. Right? Loophole?
You're on your own.
What that, c'est la vie? Man. I mean, in a way, I could see, them go, yeah, that's what you get for lying to us. You thought you were going to avoid us, but guess what? You're going to get it from your own now. There's a lot of honor, isn't there? Because that's not what Joshua does. Joshua commenced a 20-mile force march overnight from the lowland across the hill country and over. Now, an average military on good terrain in the daylight, that's the maximum they can normally travel. I mean, a normal person to walk it. If you go back to Nineveh when Jonah walked, it says 3-day walk. If you divide out the city size, it's about 20 miles a day. Jonah walked the city. Now take an army and move them through the mountains. Remember, Jericho was a difficult place to travel through, and they're coming up and over and through the night. And they're going to fight in the morning. No rest. There's no estimation of, I try to find, how big a force did he take? We do know it wasn't a scouting party, that it was the mighty men of valor, and that's all we know. The last numbers we have is around the Battle of Ai, when they used 30,000. But they have a lot more than 30,000. Remember, it's numbered, before they crossed Jordan, 600,000 men of fighting age. That were now fighting age and military qualified. You know what I mean? They're in that age bracket, not necessarily capable. But anyway, it's a large army. I don't see him, and especially he probably knows he's not going up against one king. He's going up against a large force. So I think he took more, at least more than 30,000 soldiers that night. Now, on their road before they arrived. Now, and that's the other thing is, traveling at night, what type of lighting did they have? Have you ever tried to walk a trail at night? I know you get night vision, and after a while you can get to where you can see. Obviously, they could see some, but and look at the speed in which you could travel. at night versus being able to see where you're walking, and especially you're not walking down a valley. So this is one big movement of troops, and it is even military tacticians have looked at this and went, that's impressive. Because even if Civil War battles, where our American Civil War, you know, when you look at Sherman and Beauregard and some of those battles there, trying to move 30,000 soldiers with horses, and they had supply trains coming behind them, this is a feat. That's what I want to bring out. But the Lord encourages Joshua. He tells him on the way, don't worry, I've given them into your hand. Just prior, as they get there, and let's stop and look at this map here, kind of orient you on this battle map. So what we see here is, if we look, we see that they're starting from over here. Here's Gilgal. Remember, this is all valley, so very low terrain. We don't know exactly, but this was kind of a common route coming up this direction through there. There's a couple of routes. There's the one here, Jericho to Jerusalem, but I doubt they went that route because that's one of the cities, the king. So they probably moved where this purple arrow is. These yellow dots here, these are cities that are Hivites, or as we would say, they're basically the Gibeonites. Every one of those yellow ones. So there's multiple cities that are going to be caught up. But Gibeon is the focal point of this battle. So we have all the red arrows are the other four kings. And if you look at Jerusalem, it's this little short red arrow. That's the fifth king. So all the army is moving up there. So as they approach, coming from the east, going into the west, they end up, as they come in from the high ground, which is always good. And they come in, and as they're coming down, the Lord, it's shock. Because, you know, all those armies are focused on the Gibeonites, the city. And they know what they're up against. I bet they went a couple of days, moving, and they get there, get aligned. Now, just imagine all these kings trying to coordinate their fighting as well. Very easy to cause some chaos. So they're waiting, but they're not expecting an army to show up in the morning, no matter what the size. Now, and if you got 30,000 soldiers, you're not going to be able to count them that rapidly, because one of the things he does is immediately he engages. There was an old Union general who said, the firstest with the mostest. And once you make contact, you don't break contact. You don't let up. You know where they learned that? From the Bible. Because once you break contact, you don't know where they're going. And you also don't know what the enemy's going to do. Can they regroup? Are they going to ambush you? So it's better to press the fight and just go. And this is something you see that Jericho, from Ai, the battle dynamics that they use there, this shock and awe of coming over the top, created, and the Lord did this. The Lord set it into motion and created this uncertainty with them, and the enemy, and they're like panic, and they throws them into panic. This isn't the first time, because you remember Gideon with the lights and the candles, and there's other times where the Lord has kind of prepped psychologically the enemy so that when God's people showed up, they were already in fear and disarray. The problem is when they panic, they take off. If you follow that yellow arrow there, let's get my laser. This orange across and down right there, they unwittingly put themselves into a kill zone. That's what the military call it. I'm using military jargon. A choke point. And the Lord's artillery comes in, and the Lord starts pounding them with rocks. That's what it says. You can read it. It's amazing.
Hailstone.
And it says rocks from heaven, or it could be hail. But you just think about the size of hailstones even that we have at times. 1 inch. You know, if you had 1 inch or so, maybe 1 inch, you see the damage hail has done, like in West Texas and stuff in places. I mean, it has torn roofs apart, shattered windshields, right? And those start pelting them from the moment they start down. And once they hit that choke point, there's nowhere for them to go. And the scripture describes the fact that more of them were killed by the hailstorm, the bombardment that God put on them, than what they encountered with the Israelis fighting them. So quickly, no matter what size of force, they're in disarray, they're getting pounded, and they can't get away from it. One of the most fearful things to a soldier is artillery. It's artillery, because you can't get away from it. You know, direct rounds and somebody shooting at you, you can see it, but this stuff is, you know, artillery. So it is causing more and more. And that's the part of the plan that God has for them. And so they end up in this engagement and in this rapid movement, in that first contact, in the routing into the pass, and then this extent of the pursuit that continues. And like I said, you know, one of the things, they pursue them, and they want to keep that contact. But you only have so many daylight hours, right? And they're afraid. Joshua knows that if I let them go, it's going to lose contact. They can regroup, they can get supplied, and then they can come out and come after us again. And so in chapter 10, in verse 12, we read, "At that time Joshua spoke to the Lord in the day when the Lord gave the Amorites over to the sons of Israel. And he said in the sight of Israel, 'Sun, stand still at Gibeon, and moon in the valley of Ajalon.' And the sun stood still, and the moon stopped, until the nation took vengeance on their enemies. Is this not written in the book of Jasher? The sun stopped in the midst of heaven and did not hurry to its set for a whole day." There's a ton of things what does this mean? You know, did it literally? Is it figuratively? And there are a dozen different theories I could sit and we could squirrel off into. I just think I know what the answer is. The sun stood still and the moon didn't move. Isn't that what it also says in the book of Jasher? Have you ever read the book of Jasher? No, none of us have. Because we don't know where it's at. It's one of these books. It's one of the 5 books that nobody knows where it's at. But the writer and the people of that day, they had access to it. And they knew that it's a way of reinforcing that this was something supernatural, not something that was just, figurative. But it allowed them to have that extra day. So as they pursue, they go ahead and defeat this coalition. And in that defeat, one of the things that happen is they overrun, and in that chaos, all those kings find themselves in a cave hiding. Well, that doesn't turn out so well, because they get found and they end up being pinned into that cave, and they're held there. And Joshua gives them the instructions and tells them, don't touch them. Put a guard on the cave, block them in, and get after the soldiers. Fight the fight. Keep the contact with the enemy. After they finally do defeat the armies, they come back and they bring the kings out. Joshua brings them out and he has them line up. And then he makes them bow down. And he tells all the tribe leaders, come up, put your foot on their neck. There's no more humiliation. And that'd be a little weird. I mean, you've been in battle all day. You've been marching all night. You bring these guys out, and then all of a sudden, at the end of all of that, kind of the highlight of it is you have the kings in front of you, and they're bowed down and then you put your foot on them. That is the ultimate level of humiliation and dominance over them.
Is it the bottom of, like, the bottom of your shoe? I mean,
Yeah, the bottom of your shoe is on top of their neck. And then he stands them up, and Joshua executes them. And then he hangs their bodies. But it does mention he brings them down. And you notice that that's one thing. You never leave a body hanging on a tree. It defiles the land. Does that sound familiar when Jesus was crucified? Right? The Jews went and said, hey, we got to bring him down. You can't leave him up. It's a Passover. You're going to defile the land. And so they brought Jesus' body down and buried him. So it's interesting how that. So I thought I'd share that with you. This is just a list of the kings that he defeated. Now, all the cities in the south were conquered except which one? I got a star for you if you get it. If you don't, I got a star for you too. You know, everybody's a winner. Which one did he not defeat? Oh, don't be shy, guess. There's one very significant city. Ooh, I just gave it away. No. The ones listed up there. So the king is on the left. The city is on the right. So which one in that list, cities, was not conquered? Jerusalem. When was Jerusalem finally conquered? Oh man, I'm really pushing it now. And who did it? No, the Old Testament. These are, in this, the city, during the whole time of the period of the Judges and Samuel, Jerusalem's not conquered. They killed the king, but they didn't conquer the city. It wasn't until David. And it became kind of the Switzerland, the island in the stream, that they could not get Jerusalem. And David, when he tried to reunite the tribes, he had his capital set up in Hebron. But that was in the Judah district. And so he knew that if he was going to unite the tribes, he needed kind of a neutral place. And guess who didn't rule any place? Nobody ruled Jerusalem. So he goes up. And this is a story about the first man that can bring me water from the well and breach the walls. I'll let you marry my daughter. And I can't remember who it was. Joab? Maybe Joab. He sounds like the guy that would have done it. And then he brings the water to him, and then he pours the water out. And David goes, I'm not even drinking it because, But he took Jerusalem, David did, and he made it his capital, which became really a neutral site. And it showed all the tribes that he's not going to rule from Judah because he's from Judah, but he is going to rule from there. And this goes all the way back. But anyway, I know I kind of digress on it. But it's kind of significant because every time I read it, I keep thinking, yeah, the king died, but Jerusalem went, and all the cities that were burnt. And there's nothing where God says, hey, you forgot one, you need to go get Jerusalem. But yet we know Jerusalem's in his plan, right? Why didn't, think about this. God's already picked out the territory. He's going to put his people there. But he also knows that that's where Abraham's son was sacrificed. This is where Melchizedek was at. And that this is Mount Zion. But yet he lets it go unoccupied by any of the Israelites until David. Just food for thought. So the significance of all of this, what we find in the Southern campaign, is that idea of the God's sovereignty and his support and everything that he's doing for him. That total victory, not partial, in these campaigns anyway. This is just kind of a little map showing their little journey, going around. But But you notice what's missing? Which city is missing up there? Jerusalem. So now they've done the south. Now, geographically, tactically, militarily, this is not a place you want to fight chariots with because they don't have them. And you have the lowlands, but now they're going to go north. And they have more mountain and some valleys. And so now this next one, the northern kings freak out. Let me try to get rid of that. I don't know why it won't let me. I drew that line and it's still staying up there. There we go. Okay, that's as close. We'll have one red dot. That's better. So the northern kings decide, okay, we got to do something. We cannot sit around. So they line up, and this pink line is showing the invasion from Gilgal. Again, it's like they left basically the families and livestock and everything down in Gilgal. And so after they complete the southern campaign, they come back again. Now there's no doubt they're coming up the river valley. They're going to come up through the middle of the valley, which the Valley of Armageddon, by the way, Medigo, is one of these valleys there's so much history that just overlaps. It's just so amazing as well when you look at this. And so he starts out with the battle at the waters of Merom, and just marches right through the northern cities. There are cities, it's interesting, that where he dedicates to total destruction. That everything like Jericho, nothing was to be left. Everything was to be razed to the ground, and everything was to be totally devoted to destruction.
Anything that breathed.
Anything. In any material, it's ashes. But that's, they didn't do it to all the cities. And I never really told necessarily, but I think the pattern kind of shows that it's probably because of a judgment upon those specific cities. I think there's 4 or 5 cities that are ended up being devoted unto total destruction as it's described.
I'm surprised that they would not, why did they want to even burn and kill all the animals also?
Yeah, that's what I mean, because if they burned and destroyed everything, then they'd have nothing, right? And then that defeats the purpose of what God said. Hey, we're going to give you some land, and you're going to have the vineyards, and you're going to have the houses, and you're not going to have to do anything. So he's got to leave them something to live in, because settlement's already starting in the south. I'm sure that when he went back and they finished the south, he probably already started, They got to go occupy, or guess what? The void is going to be filled. So anyway, but as they go through the north, these cities of destruction are something that's kind of important. And that completes that northern south. So now at this point, we see where they've come across, rededicated, tremendous victory, right? And then failure, and then the Gibeonites, and then they go conquer the south, and then they end up swinging to the north there. So what's interesting is chapter 12 is a division of a list of kings. The first list is those killed by Moses. The second list is a list of those that Joshua destroys. I kind of wondered, what was that about? I mean, why do you care about everything on the other side of the Jordan all those times? But what it shows is the continuity of what God has done all the way from the time they've come across. Every enemy that tried to come at them, from the time of their departure, God has been there and consistently made them victorious. And he did the same with Joshua, you see? In other words, it's showing, remember at the chapter 1, when he says, be strong and be courageous, you're going to lead my people, and they're going to know you. They're going to know you like they knew Moses, and you're going to be respected like Moses. And the people need that. They need that this is the first massive change in leadership. All they've known for 40 years, even from the start of Egypt all the way through the 40 years, is Moses. and this young kid that started following him around named Joshua. And then he dies, and now where's Moses? We got to go in and do battle now? We need the guy that killed all the kings on the other side of the river. And now, when we see the summation, it's like, look at this. Moses, look what he did. Look what Joshua's done. And that's kind of about the best I can think. And now remember, this is not directly written to us. This is written as a historical document for the Hebrews and all the way up to Jesus' time to go back again and look at the continuity of what God has promised and did, and he did it through these two great men. You know that in Aramaic, Joshua means Jesus.
Yes.
That's kind of a cool link, and you could go down a whole cool thing about a parallel between Joshua and Jesus himself, but we don't have time. As a matter of fact, we're running out of time tonight. So it shows that continuity. That's what I was talking about. And it highlights again, God is the key factor, in this type of encouragement. And it provides them that encouragement. It legitimizes the promised land because it's what he had always been telling them they were going to have. And it also foreshadows the future victories that they're going to have, that's going to come up, and reminds them of God's commands. It's kind of like in reverse where the Texans were motivated by what phrase? During their independence from Mexico. Remember the Alamo. In reverse, they needed to keep chanting, remember Ai. Remember Ai, because that's when we didn't follow God. And don't forget about the Gibeonites too. That was a little blunder there as well. So, there's also a symbolic numbering if you go through King's things. So lessons for today is one, seeking God's advice in everything. We go back to the Gibeonites, and understanding that. Trusting in God's faithfulness. And when we say sovereignty, it's another one of those big words. But in other words, God is in charge of everything. So if he says something, it's going to happen. It will happen.
Oof, I put that mic in a really bad spot.
Something else. Okay, so that's 9 through 12. Next week, we're going to look at 13 through 21. So you want to go ahead and kind of read through it. This last section, I call it if you're a military geek, you liked it. Otherwise, it was just a lot of kings' names that you couldn't pronounce, and you kind of just go through and go. So that's why sometimes I like doing kind of the survey style like this, so you get kind of a little bit deeper without bogging down. But it would be good. Go ahead and read 13 through 21. All right. Well, I hope you enjoyed the class. Sorry, Aline and Terrell and Darren, and I didn't say good evening, but they were with us from the beginning as well. So let's have a quick prayer before we depart. Our most gracious Lord, thank you so much for these wonderful stories that we can go back and study, and that we can make a real application in our lives and looking at the actions, even though they may seem like such grand schemes of campaigns and battles, but we can see the same type of attitude that we should possess as well to be victorious in the battles that we face every day in our lives. Father, thank you so much for all the blessings you give us, and we look forward to the future ones. We ask this in Jesus' name, amen. All right, 9:45 Bible study, 10:45 worship, 4 p.m., and this is all a Sunday. And next week, we'll see you back again. Until then, God bless.